So why should we have faith? Why should we believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Rising from the dead, that sounds very far-fetched. Is there a life after this one? That sounds very far-fetched. But wait a minute. Let's get real. Let's understand what we understand now from science and the Bible. We understand that there must be more dimensions of space, and that's where God dwells, including our space here. And also there is at least one more dimension of time where God dwells, same yesterday, today, and forever. We know that God's messed with us. He's been here. He's been here at various times. He breathed into the hearts of men to write things in the Bible, and we've seen through prophecy, there's evidence to suggest He's been here. He's talked to us. He is outside of our space-time dimension. So it's not at all far-fetched that Jesus, who is also, He came to be a man, but He's God. He rose from the dead. That's not a tough thing to wrap our brains around, really, when we understand what we see from the evidence posed to us that God has given us. So, more evidence. Look at more evidence of why we believe that Jesus rose from the dead. Let's look at His disciples. Peter was terrified. When they arrested Jesus, Jesus told him, "You're going to deny me 3 times during the night that you even know me. You're going to be scared." He was afraid. A lot of the disciples were fearful when He was arrested. They thought they might be arrested and beaten too. And yet, within a few weeks after Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead and appeared to them, these were the boldest people you can imagine. And what did they do? They lived pretty much in poverty the rest of their lives for years and years and years. They split up and they went around the known world preaching this gospel. They were beaten, they were thrown in prison, and at some point, all of them, except one, were asked or told, "You either recant and tell us that Jesus is not who He said He was, or we're going to put you to death." And to a man, even though they were individual, they were on their own, God was with them, but they were alone. They all made the same decision. We saw Him risen from the dead. We know this gospel is true. You're going to have to kill us because we won't recant. And none of them did. And that's pretty impressive. And then going back to Peter, who was the rock, who was a rock, the little rock that helped build the church, in addition to Paul and the others. He said they were going to crucify Him, and he said, "I'm not willing that I should be crucified in the same manner that my Lord was. You'll have to crucify me upside down." And they did. These men were faithful, and the fact that they all went to the grave, that they all were willing to be put to death rather than recant, is strong evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. What is some other evidence? We have all these prophecies of Jesus that we know were fulfilled about Him dying on the cross, and many of those prophecies, including the one in Isaiah chapter 53, talk not only about His death and His sacrifice, but He'll see the light of life again. He will come back to life. So the prophecies were that He would rise from the dead. That's important too. The first portions of those prophecies were very vividly met, and hey, He rose from the dead, and so that's other evidence to suggest that. I would argue that probably the greatest evidence of Jesus' resurrection is Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus, Roman citizen, zealous in the Jewish faith, initially felt like Christianity and Jesus were heretics. He was a blasphemer. He went out of his way to round up Christians, have them thrown in jail or put to death. He was holding the coats of those who stoned Christianity's first martyr, Stephen, when he was speaking before the Sanhedrin. And oh, by the way, what was Stephen doing? He knew his Old Testament. He was going through the scriptures, proving, making an argument for the case that Jesus was the Messiah. And don't blame the Jews. Please, let's not do that. Jesus is Jewish. All His disciples were Jewish. If you look at Jewish history, we understand one thing. They and we are human. I believe they're God's chosen people. I'm just a Gentile. I'm just adopted. I'll take that. All right? So yes, the Jewish leaders of the day are a lot like other leaders of any day. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It happened to be that the high priest at the time and a lot of the Pharisees and Sadducees, they're off on the wrong track. They were on the wrong side at that point in time. Okay, so let's deal with it. At any rate, Saul of Tarsus was zealous against Christians. But what happened? The account in Scripture is that he met Jesus on the road. And Jesus said to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Saul replied, "Who are you, Lord?" He says, "It's Jesus who you are persecuting." Whoa. Okay, life change right there. Saul changed his name to Paul and became, instead of the greatest enemy of the church, became the most beneficial Christian of all time. He wrote a lot of the letters in the New Testament. His testimony of his life and what he did went from Roman citizen, wealthy, respected, educated. He talks about it. He had everything. You want to be egotistical? I can be egotistical. He can spell it out. That's what he had. But what did he choose to do for years and years and years? Be a tent maker, live in poverty, be beaten to an inch of his life. They drug his body out of a crowd before he almost died. They had to sneak him out of a city over a wall at night because some evil people of the day knew that he was dangerous because he was promoting Christianity. So what we're talking about in the conversion of Saul is probably the greatest piece of evidence that he met a resurrected Jesus. So science, Bible, the evidence of the disciples and Paul, there's no reason to doubt that there is a life after this one, and Jesus did rise from the dead.